The merciless Arizona sun beats down on the parched desert landscape as three riders approach the isolated Ironwood Ranch, dust clouds billowing behind their horses like angry ghosts. From the porch of the weathered ranch house, an old man sits, motionless in his rocking chair, his unseeing eyes hidden behind dark spectacles, his weathered hands resting on what appears to be an ordinary walking stick, but concealed within is a finely crafted steel blade. Just one of many secrets this blind rancher keeps hidden from those foolish enough to mistake his disability for weakness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Samuel Hawkins, once known throughout the territories as Deadeye Hawkins, the fastest draw west of the Mississippi, hasn't touched his revolvers in nearly 7 years. Not since the ambush that left him blind, his wife dead, and his legend buried beneath a new identity. The 62-year-old rancher's face is a roadmap of hardship, deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes, his beard neatly trimmed but streaked with silver, a permanent reminder of the passage of time. Though his eyes can no longer see, his other senses have sharpened to an almost supernatural degree, which is why he knows with absolute certainty that the approaching riders mean trouble. "Pa, 3 riders coming," calls Eliza, Samuel's 24-year-old daughter, as she steps through the front door, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. She carries herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who has taken on responsibilities beyond her years, her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical braid, her mother's emerald eyes scanning the horizon with concern. "Looks like that new marshal from Copper Gulch and 2 deputies I don't recognize." Samuel's hands tighten almost imperceptibly around his walking stick. "Marshal Donovan has no business this far from town," he says, his voice like gravel worn smooth by a desert stream. "Not unless he's looking for something, or someone." He tilts his head slightly, listening to the approaching hoofbeats. The lead horse is favoring its right foreleg. The second rider sits too heavy in his saddle, inexperienced. The third moves like a predator, light, watchful. "Be careful with that one, Eliza." Eliza glances at her father, a mixture of amazement and concern crossing her features. Even after 7 years, his ability to discern such details through sound alone still astonishes her. "Should I get Uncle James from the south pasture?" Samuel shakes his head. "No time. Just stay calm and let me do the talking." His weathered fingers drum softly against the concealed blade in his walking stick. "And Eliza, if things go badly, remember what I taught you." The riders pull up 20 yards from the porch, dust settling around them as they assess the modest ranch. A 2-story house weathered by sun and wind, a large barn that needs paint, corrals containing 12 fine horses, and fields stretching toward distant mountains. Marshal Everett Donovan, a tall man in his 40s with a carefully maintained mustache and cold blue eyes, dismounts first. His silver star catches the sunlight as he adjusts his hat, studying the blind man on the porch with poorly disguised contempt. "Mr. Hawkins," Donovan calls out, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Hope we're not interrupting your afternoon." The words are polite, but his tone suggests otherwise. Samuel rises slowly, his movements deliberate but fluid for a man his age. Marshal Donovan, quite a ride from Copper Gulch just to pay a social call. His unseeing eyes seem to find Donovan with unsettling accuracy. "What brings you to Ironwood Ranch?" Donovan approaches the porch steps, removing his hat as a show of false respect. "Just doing my rounds, checking on outlying properties. These are my deputies, Mercer and Caldwell." He gestures to the men behind him. Mercer, young and nervous, unable to hide his discomfort. Caldwell, older and harder, his eyes constantly scanning, assessing, a predator's gaze lingering too long on Eliza. Mighty unusual for a town marshal. To patrol this far out, Samuel observes mildly. We're in county territory here, as I recall. Something flickers across Donovan's face. Annoyance, perhaps, at being questioned. Times are changing, Mr. Hawkins. Copper Gulch is growing, and the mayor has expanded my jurisdiction. He smiles thinly. Mind if we water our horses? Been a long, dusty ride. Samuel nods once. Eliza, show the deputies to the well. As his daughter leads the two men toward the side of the house, Samuel gestures to the empty chair beside him. Something on your mind, Marshal? You didn't ride all this way for water. Donovan settles into the chair, placing his hat on his knee. For a moment he says nothing, studying the blind rancher with calculating eyes. Heard about the trouble you had with the Corrigan brothers last week, he finally says, watching for a reaction. Samuel's expression remains impassive. No trouble to speak of. They were passing through, stopped for water, then moved on. That's not how they tell it, Donovan counters. They say your foreman ran them off at gunpoint, said you've been hostile to travelers crossing your land. And land is my land, Marshal, not a public thoroughfare. Samuel's voice hardens slightly. The Corrigan brothers weren't travelers. They were taking stock counts, testing boundaries, moving like men planning to return. Donovan leans forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. Between us, Hawkins, the Corrigans have powerful friends in Copper Gulch now. Mayor Coleman considers them important business partners in the town's future. And what business would that be? Samuel asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Progress, Mr. Hawkins. The railroad's coming through this valley next year. Land values are about to change dramatically. Donovan pauses, letting the implications hang in the air. Coleman and his investors are offering fair prices to ranchers willing to sell now. Very generous offers, in fact. Samuel's unseeing eyes seem to stare straight through Donovan. This land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. The Marshal sighs, as if disappointed, but not surprised. That's your right, of course, but these are changing times. A blind man running a ranch this size, it's unusual. Some might even call it dangerous. Is that a threat, Marshal? Samuel asks, his voice deceptively soft. Donovan stands, replacing his hat with deliberate slowness. Not at all, just an observation. Times are changing, and men need to change with them, or get left behind. He steps closer, lowering his voice. The Corrigans mentioned something interesting. Said when they were here, you moved around your property like a man who could see, knew exactly where they were standing, even with your back turned. Samuel's face betrays nothing. When a man loses his sight, his other senses compensate. Maybe, Donovan concedes, or maybe there's more to Samuel Hawkins than meets the eye. He pauses. You know, there are stories about a gunman who disappeared from these territories about 7 years back. They called him Deadeye. Rumor was he could shoot a playing card edge-on at 50 paces. A muscle tightens almost imperceptibly in Samuel's jaw. I've heard the stories, but legends tend to grow taller with each telling, Marshal. In my experience, few men live up to their reputations. Donovan studies him for a long moment. Funny. Thing about Deadeye, no one ever saw his face clearly, always wore a black duster and a hat pulled low, disappeared right around the time you showed up in these parts, buying this land with gold coin. He steps off the porch. Just a curious coincidence, I suppose. Samuel stands, leaning slightly on his walking stick. If you're done with your history lesson, Marshal, I have a ranch to run. Even a blind man has his chores. At the well, Eliza fills a water bucket while keeping a careful eye on the deputies. Caldwell leans against the stone wall, watching her with undisguised interest. Pretty girl like you must get lonely out here, he says, his voice carrying an edge that makes her skin crawl. Not much society way out at Ironwood. We manage just fine, Eliza replies curtly, handing the filled bucket to Mercer, who accepts, it with a mumbled thanks. Unlike his companion, the younger deputy seems uncomfortable with Caldwell's behavior. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Your pa always been blind. Caldwell presses, moving closer than necessary. Must be hard, running a place this size with a crippled... Old man! Eliza straightens, her green eyes flashing. My father manages this ranch better than most men with perfect eyesight. I'd appreciate it if you'd show some respect, deputy. Caldwell's mouth twists into an unpleasant smile. No offense meant, Miss Hawkins. Just making conversation. His hand brushes against hers as she passes him the second water bucket, the contact. Deliberate and lingering. From the porch, Samuel's head turns sharply in their direction, as if sensing the interaction despite the distance. Eliza! He calls, his voice carrying effortlessly across the yard. I believe the deputies have had enough of our hospitality. Donovan watches this exchange with interest. Remarkable hearing for a man his age, he comments as he walks toward his horse. Almost unnatural, one might say. Samuel stands motionless. On the porch, his posture straight despite his years. Nothing about him suggesting vulnerability or weakness. The desert teaches a man to pay attention, Marshal. You either adapt or you die. As the lawmen mount their horses, Donovan tips his hat. We'll be seeing you again soon, Mr. Hawkins. The mayor's very interested in discussing the future of this valley with all the local ranchers. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. There's a town meeting next Saturday in Copper Gulch. Your presence would be appreciated. I don't much care for town meetings, Samuel replies evenly. This one you might want to attend, Donovan says. Important decisions will be made, with or without your input. He turns his horse. Think about what I said, Hawkins. The world doesn't stop for blind men or for ghosts of the past. As the riders disappear into the heat haze, Eliza joins her father on the porch. What was that about, Pa? Why is the marshal suddenly so interested in our ranch? Samuel's hands tighten around his walking stick. It's not about the ranch, Eliza. It's about the land and the power that comes with controlling it. He turns toward her, his unseeing eyes somehow finding her face, and it's about something else, something from before. Before? Eliza asks, though part of her already knows. There have always been whispers, questions about her father's past that he refused to answer. Samuel sighs deeply, the sound of a man who has carried a heavy burden for too long. Get your Uncle James back from the south pasture. We need to prepare. He moves toward the door with surprising certainty, navigating the familiar space without hesitation. And Eliza, check the loose floorboard in my room. There's a box there I haven't opened in 7 years. Pa? Eliza's voice is uncertain. What's in the box? Samuel pauses in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the dimness within. Insurance, he says quietly, for when the past catches up to the present. As the day progresses, an uneasy quiet settles over Ironwood Ranch. In the distance, a dust cloud rises, not from the direction the marshal and his deputies departed, but from the east, marking the approach of more riders. James Winters, Samuel's brother-in-law and ranch foreman, stands at the corral watching the horizon with concern. At 55, James carries himself with the rigid posture of his former cavalry days, his face weathered by sun and wind, his eyes sharp as they track the distant riders. "How many do you make it?" he asks Eliza, who joins him with a rifle, cradled in her arms. "At least 6, she replies, squinting against the harsh sunlight. Moving fast, James spits tobacco juice into the dust. Too many to be a coincidence after the marshal's visit. He turns to her, his expression grave. "Your pa told me about the conversation, about the Corrigans and their railroad friends." Eliza's face hardens. This is our land. We won't be bullied off it. No, we won't, James agrees, his hand resting on his holstered Colt. But things might get worse before they get better. You need to be prepared for that. He hesitates, choosing his next words carefully. Eliza, there are things about your father you should know, things from before the accident. Before he can continue, Samuel emerges from the house, moving with surprising agility for a blind man. He's changed clothes. Gone is the simple rancher's attire, replaced by a crisp black shirt and dark trousers that somehow transform his bearing, making him seem taller, more formidable. 6 riders, he announces without preamble. Heavy horses, moving like men with purpose. James stares at his brother-in-law. How the hell do you know that from inside the house? A ghost of a smile touches Samuel's lips. The vibrations in the floorboards. The way sound carries across the valley. His hand moves to an object tucked into his belt, partially concealed by his shirt, the smooth wooden grip of a revolver that hasn't seen daylight in 7 years. Get the hands back from the north pasture, James. I want everyone accounted for. When our visitors arrive, Eliza watches her father with new eyes, seeing glimpses of a man she's never truly known, a stranger emerging from behind the familiar face of the blind rancher who raised her. Pa, what's happening? Who are you expecting? Samuel turns toward her voice, his expression softening slightly. The past never stays buried, Eliza. Not completely. He reaches out with unerring accuracy, his hand finding her shoulder. I've tried to keep you safe from who I was, but it seems time has run out. His fingers brush against the wooden box. Tucked under his arm, a simple, unadorned container that somehow seems to carry the weight of unspoken histories. And who were you? She asks, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel's unseeing eyes seem to look beyond her, into a distance only. He can perceive. A ghost, he says simply, but now it's time for the ghost to remember how to haunt. He opens the box, revealing a pair of meticulously maintained revolvers, their silver inlay catching the harsh sunlight, like forgotten promises finally remembered. As the approaching riders draw closer, a hawk circles lazily overhead, its keen eyes witnessing the transformation below, a blind rancher reclaiming a deadly legacy that the Arizona desert thought long buried beneath 7 years of careful silence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to our tale. The riders are visible now, dust billowing behind them as they approach Ironwood Ranch with the confidence of men unaccustomed to resistance. At their head rides a tall figure in an expensive Eastern suit, incongruous against the rugged backdrop of the Arizona Territory. Victor Corrigan guides his stallion with the casual arrogance of someone who views the world as property waiting to be acquired. Flanking him are 5 men whose appearances speak of violence as a profession, guns prominently displayed, eyes constantly scanning for threats, bodies tense with the readiness that comes from living on the knife's edge of confrontation. Inside the ranch house, Samuel sits at the kitchen table, his fingers moving with practiced precision as he cleans and loads the revolvers from the wooden box. Each motion is fluid, automatic, muscle memory untouched by the years of disuse or his blindness. Eliza watches from the doorway, mesmerized by this stranger who wears her father's face. The Corrigans won't stop with threats this time, James says, checking his own rifle by the window. Not with that railroad money backing them. Samuel nods, spinning one revolver cylinder with a flick of his wrist, testing its action. The sound is crisp, definitive, like the period at the end of a long unfinished sentence. No, he agrees quietly. They won't. Pa, Eliza says, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Who are you really? Samuel pauses, his unseeing eyes turning toward her voice. For a moment, the only sound is the approaching hoofbeats, growing louder with each passing second. "Someone I hoped you'd never have to meet," he finally answers, tucking the revolvers into the holsters he's strapped around his waist, holsters worn smooth from years of use before being locked away. He stands, adjusting the gun belt with the ease of a man donning a familiar suit. "But now it seems you have no choice." Outside, the riders pull up in a semicircle before the house, their horses snorting and stamping in the dust. Victor Corrigan dismounts leisurely, straightening his city clothes with fastidious care. His face is handsome in a cold, calculated way, eyes the pale blue of winter ice, mouth set in a perpetual expression of superior amusement. He surveys the modest ranch with the appraising gaze of a man already calculating its value after the current owners have been removed. "Hawkins," he calls out, his voice carrying the cultured tones of Eastern education layered over frontier ruthlessness. "I believe we have business to discuss." The front door opens, and Samuel Hawkins emerges onto the porch, moving with a confidence that belies his blindness. Gone is the tentative step of the blind rancher. In its place is the purposeful stride of a man who knows exactly where he stands in relation to the world around him. The dark glasses that normally hide his unseeing eyes are absent, revealing milky white orbs that somehow still manage to convey an unnerving intensity. Corrigan's smug expression falters slightly at the sight of the gun belt around Samuel's waist. "Well now," he says, recovering quickly, "this is unexpected. I was told you were a peaceable man these days, Mr. Hawkins." Samuel's head tilts slightly, as if listening to something beyond the obvious conversation. "You were misinformed," he replies, his voice carrying an edge that wasn't present during the marshal's visit. "Just as you're misinformed if you think you're welcome on my land." Victor Corrigan's confidence wavers momentarily as he studies the blind rancher standing before him. Something about Hawkins' posture has shifted, a subtle transformation that triggers warning signals in Corrigan's mind. The easy target he expected has been replaced by something altogether more dangerous. "I've come with a generous proposition, Hawkins," Corrigan announces, recovering his composure with practiced ease. He removes a folded document from his breast pocket. "Mayor Coleman and the Arizona and Pacific Railroad Company are prepared to offer you 3 times the market value for Ironwood Ranch." His thin smile doesn't reach his eyes. "A blind man your age could live very comfortably on that sum. Perhaps somewhere more civilized than this wilderness." Samuel remains motionless on the porch, his milky eyes seeming to look through Corrigan rather than at him. "This land isn't for sale at any price, Mr. Corrigan. I believe my foreman made that clear during your last visit." Corrigan's face hardens. That was before. This is now. He gestures toward his armed companions. "The railroad is coming through this valley, Hawkins. Progress doesn't ask permission." From her position at the side window, Eliza watches the confrontation with mounting tension, her rifle ready. Beside her, James Winters mutters, "5 gunmen plus Corrigan, bad odds." "I count only 3 actual threats," Samuel says quietly through the open doorway, his acute hearing having caught James's assessment. "The 2 on the left are hired hands, nervous, inexperienced. The man on the right with the shotgun is dangerous. The tall one beside Corrigan has killed before, he likes it. The last one's a tracker, judging by his moccasins. He'll hang back, look for advantage." James and Eliza exchange startled glances. From their position, they can confirm the accuracy of Samuel's assessment, though how he could possibly know these details without seeing the men is beyond comprehension. Outside, Corrigan steps forward, irritation creeping into his voice. "I don't think you understand your situation, Hawkins. This isn't a negotiation. The railroad has already secured rights to most properties in this valley." He gestures expansively. "You're an island in a rising tide. Eventually, you'll be underwater." Then, "I'll learn to swim," Samuel replies evenly. A flash of anger crosses Corrigan's face. "Don't be a fool. What can a blind man and a girl possibly hope to accomplish against the future? You're standing in the way of progress." "Seems to me," Samuel observes calmly, "a man bringing 5 guns to deliver a business proposition isn't interested in progress. He's interested in intimidation." A tense silence follows. One of Corrigan's hired guns shifts uncomfortably in his saddle. "You have 1 week to reconsider," Corrigan finally says, his voice tight with controlled rage. "After that, circumstances may become less favorable to your interests." Samuel takes a single step forward, and something in his movement causes the horses to shift nervously, sensing a predator in their midst. "Mr. Corrigan, I was attempting to live peacefully here. That's all I've wanted these past 7 years." There's a subtle change in his tone, something colder, more precise. "But if you're determined to disturb that peace, you should know that blindness hasn't made me helpless, merely patient." One of Corrigan's men, the tall killer Samuel identified, laughs harshly. Big talk from a blind old. The words die in his throat as Samuel's hand moves with blinding speed. In one fluid motion, almost too fast to follow, he draws and fires. The bullet kicks up dirt precisely between the tall gunman's boots. Before anyone can react, Samuel has returned the revolver to its holster, the movement so swift it seems almost an illusion. A stunned silence falls over the yard. The gunman looks down at the dust still settling between his feet, his face draining of color. "That was a warning," Samuel says quietly. "I'd aim higher next time." Corrigan stares at the blind rancher with new eyes, reassessing what he thought he knew. "Perhaps," he says carefully, "we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Let's discuss this, like reasonable men." "I'm not interested in discussion, Mr. Corrigan, only in being left alone." Samuel's unseeing eyes somehow find Corrigan with unnerving accuracy. "Take your men and leave my property. Don't return." Corrigan studies him for a long moment, calculation evident in his cold gaze. Finally he nods and remounts his horse. "This isn't over, Hawkins," he says, voice tight with suppressed rage. "Not by a long shot. For your sake," Samuel replies. "I hope it is." As Corrigan and his men ride away, tension hangs in the air like the electrical charge before a thunderstorm. Inside the house, Eliza lowers her rifle, her hands trembling slightly from the encounter. "How?" she asks, turning to face her father as he re-enters. "How did you make that shot? You can't see." Samuel removes his gun belt, placing it carefully. On the table, I heard him shift his weight, knew exactly where he was standing from the sound of his voice, the creak of his leather, the rhythm of his breathing. "That's impossible," James interjects, staring at his brother-in-law as if seeing him for the first time. Samuel sighs deeply, settling into a chair. "When I lost my sight, your sister wouldn't let me surrender to darkness. Every day for hours, she'd move around the room, making small sounds, dropping a pin, striking a match, shuffling cards, made me identify locations, distances, even what she was doing, all by sound." A sad smile touches his face. "Margaret was stubborn that way. But that shot," Eliza persists. "7 years of practice didn't start with guns," Samuel explains. "It started with listening. Learning to map the world through sound, through air currents, through the subtle vibrations that most people never notice." He turns his face toward her. "Your mother made me promise not to touch my guns again, said that life was behind me, but she also made sure I could protect you if that life ever caught up to us." Eliza pulls up a chair opposite her father. "Pa, who were you, really?" The question hangs in the air between them. Before Samuel can answer, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupts. A single rider, approaching at a gallop. "That'll be Tom. Jenkins from the Rocking J," James says, moving to the window. "Riding hard." Minutes later, the young rancher bursts through the door, hat in hand, face flushed from his hard ride. "Mr. Hawkins," he gasps, "there's trouble brewing in Copper Gulch. Marshal Donovan's deputized the Corrigan men, all of them. They're claiming authority to inspect all ranches for regulatory compliance before the railroad survey." Samuel's expression darkens. "That didn't take long." "There's more," Tom continues, accepting the water Eliza offers. "Mayor Coleman's called an emergency town meeting tomorrow, not Saturday. Word is, they're going to vote on some new ordinance affecting all properties within 20 miles of town, which conveniently includes every ranch in the valley," James growls. "Corrigan's not waiting a week," Samuel says, rising from his chair. "He's moving now, using the law as his weapon instead of guns." He turns toward his daughter's voice. "Eliza, we need to attend that meeting." "Us?" she asks, surprised. "You hate town gatherings." "Sometimes the best defense is showing your opponents you aren't afraid," Samuel replies. "Besides, I'm curious. What legal pretense Corrigan has constructed?" Tom shifts uncomfortably. "There's something else you should know, Mr. Hawkins." He glances at Eliza, then back to Samuel. "There's a stranger in town, arrived yesterday on the stage from Tucson. Been asking questions about local ranches, specifically about you." Samuel goes very still. "What kind of questions?" "About your past. Where you came from. Whether you were always blind." Tom hesitates. "He's offering money for information." "Did he give a name?" Samuel asks, his voice carefully neutral. "Calls himself Bishop, said he's a private investigator from back east." A muscle tightens in Samuel's jaw, the only indication that the name means something to him. "Thank you for bringing this news, Tom. Your father would be proud of the man you've become." After Tom departs, an uneasy silence settles over the room. Finally, Eliza breaks it. "You recognize that name, didn't you? Bishop." Samuel moves to the fireplace, his fingers finding the mantelpiece with practiced ease. "Lucas Bishop, former Pinkerton agent. Now he works for whoever pays best." He turns toward his family. "If Bishop's here, this is bigger than Corrigan and his railroad schemes." "Someone's looking for Deadeye," James says quietly. The pieces finally coming together. Samuel nods once, his expression grim. "We need to prepare. James, gather the ranch hands. Tell them only what they need to know. That trouble's coming, and we need to be ready." He pauses. "And send Billy to Devil's Canyon. Tell Matthew Ford I need to speak with him tonight." James looks startled. "Ford? The gunsmith? You sure that's wise?" "No choice," Samuel replies. "I need specialized ammunition, the kind only Matthew knows how to make." As James departs on these errands, Eliza studies her father with new eyes. "All these years," she says softly, "I thought I knew you." Samuel's face softens. "You do know me, Eliza, the part that matters most." He reaches out, finding her hand with unexpected precision. "But there are parts of my past I kept buried to protect you. Now it seems they're determined to resurface." Then, "Perhaps it's time you told me everything," she says firmly. Samuel sighs deeply, the sound of a man preparing to open long-sealed doors. "It began 22 years ago in a silver mining town called Willow Creek, now long abandoned. I was young, quick with a gun, making a name for myself in ways I'm not proud of. As twilight settles over Ironwood Ranch, Samuel recounts the history he's kept hidden for decades, the notorious gunfighter who became a legend, the bounties, the killings, the price on his head that never officially expired. He speaks of the mission that went wrong 7 years ago, the ambush that took his sight and Margaret's life, orchestrated by a man who wanted Deadeye eliminated permanently. Clayton Monroe, Samuel says, the name falling like a stone between them. Railroad magnate, banker, with politicians in his pocket from Texas to California. I was hired to protect a witness who had evidence of Monroe's corrupt dealings, land seizures, bribery, murder disguised as accidents. We never made it to the territorial court." His voice grows distant with memory. 6 men ambushed us at Diablo Pass, professional killers. I took down 4 before a bullet creased my skull. When I woke, the witness was dead. Margaret was dying, and my vision was already beginning to fade. And you think Monroe sent this bishop to find you? Eliza asks, struggling to reconcile this history with the father she's known. Bishop was Monroe's personal tracker even back then, Samuel confirms. If he's here, Monroe knows I survived, which means Corrigan's railroad isn't just any railroad. It's Monroe's latest venture. So this was never about land, Eliza realizes. It's about finishing what he started 7 years ago. Before Samuel can respond, the distinctive sound of multiple riders approaches from the east. Different from Corrigan's men, moving with purpose but not haste. James returning with the hands? Eliza asks, moving to the window. Samuel shakes his head, listening intently. No, different horses, 4 riders. He rises, reaching for his gun belt. One's riding a government-issue saddle, military or law enforcement. Moments later, Marshal Donovan approaches the house, accompanied by 3 deputies, including Caldwell from their earlier visit. The lawman's face is set with grim purpose as he dismounts. Samuel Hawkins, Donovan calls out, his voice carrying official authority. I have a warrant for your inspection of this property for compliance with Territorial Property Ordinance 14, Section 3, regarding safety standards for land adjacent to proposed railway construction. Samuel appears in the doorway, his dark glasses now back in place, leaning on his walking stick rather than wearing his gun belt, once again the image of a vulnerable blind rancher. Quite industrious, Marshal, he comments mildly. Creating new ordinances and printing warrants all in one afternoon. Donovan's eyes narrow at the implied accusation. The ordinance has been on the books for months, Hawkins. Your inspection is overdue. He produces an official-looking document. We'll need to examine all structures, water sources, and property boundaries. At this hour, Eliza challenges, stepping beside her father. The sun's nearly set. Caldwell smirks. Law doesn't sleep, Miss Hawkins. Neither does corruption. She retorts. Donovan's face hardens. Careful, young lady. Interfering with a lawful inspection is a serious offense. Samuel raises a placating hand. No need for threats, Marshal. My daughter is naturally protective. He steps aside. By all means, conduct your inspection. We have nothing to hide. Donovan appears momentarily taken aback by this easy acquiescence. Well, good. Caldwell, check the barn and outbuildings. Jenkins, the corral and water sources. He turns to his remaining deputy. Mercer, you're with me in the house. As the lawmen disperse to their assigned areas, Samuel moves with the careful steps of a blind man, his hand finding Eliza's arm for guidance, all trace of his earlier fluid confidence seemingly vanished. To anyone watching, he appears completely dependent, vulnerable. Only Eliza feels the slight pressure of his fingers on her arm, a signal they had established years ago. Play along. This is strategy, not surrender. What exactly are you looking for, Marshal? Samuel asks mildly as Donovan begins examining the main room of the house. Hazards, structural instabilities, anything that might pose a danger once construction begins. Donovan runs his hand along a bookshelf, deliberately knocking several books to the floor. Oops, sorry about that. No matter, Samuel replies evenly. Eliza can replace them later. Donovan moves toward a locked cabinet. What's in here? Family, heirlooms, Samuel answers. Nothing of interest to the railroad, I assure you. The marshal tries the lock, finds it secure, and frowns. I'll need this opened. The key is in my bedroom, top drawer of the nightstand, Samuel says. Eliza, perhaps you could fetch it for the marshal? As Eliza departs on this errand, Donovan steps closer to Samuel, lowering his voice. Impressive. Display with Corrigan earlier for a blind man. Samuel's expression reveals nothing. I'm not sure what you mean, Marshal. Come now, Hawkins. We both know there's more to you than meets the eye. Donovan circles him slowly. A blind man who can shoot between a man's feet at 20 paces. That's not just luck. Perhaps Mr. Corrigan exaggerated, Samuel suggests mildly. Perhaps, Donovan concedes. Or perhaps Deadeye Hawkins isn't as dead as people believe. Samuel's head tilts slightly. That's quite a theory, Marshal. More than a theory. Donovan leans closer. Lucas Bishop is a friend of mine. He shared some very interesting information about a notorious gunman who disappeared 7 years ago after an ambush at Diablo Pass. Samuel remains perfectly still, only the slight tightening of his hand on his walking stick betraying any reaction. Sounds like dime novel nonsense to me. Donovan smiles coldly. We'll see. He straightens as Eliza returns with the key. Thank you, Miss Hawkins. As the Marshal unlocks the cabinet, Samuel's head turns slightly toward the window, his acute hearing picking up sounds from outside. Caldwell moving around the barn, not conducting an inspection, but searching for something specific. Interesting collection, Donovan comments, examining the cabinet's contents, old photographs, letters, a small jewelry box, and various memorabilia. Nothing here about your life before Arizona Territory, I see. I wasn't aware the railroad was interested in my personal history, Marshal, Samuel replies. Donovan closes the cabinet. Just being thorough. He moves to the fireplace, studying the rifle mounted above it. Fine weapon. Do you still shoot, Mr. Hawkins, despite your condition? The rifle belonged to my late wife's father, Samuel says, deflecting the question. I keep it for sentimental reasons. Outside, Caldwell's voice suddenly rises in excitement. Marshal, you better come see this. Donovan smiles thinly at Samuel. Excuse me. Duty calls. As the Marshal strides outside, Eliza moves to the window. He's found something in the barn, she reports quietly. They're gathered around. Oh no. What is it? Samuel asks, tension evident in his voice. The false wall in the tack room, Eliza whispers. They've discovered it. Samuel's face drains. Of color. The ammunition cache. And the wanted posters, Eliza adds grimly, the ones with Deadeye Hawkins's name on them. Outside, Donovan examines the damning evidence. Boxes of specialized ammunition, several faded wanted posters offering substantial rewards for Deadeye Hawkins, dead or alive, and most incriminating of all, a black duster coat with bullet holes through the left shoulder, matching the wounds that reportedly killed the notorious gunman 7 years ago. Well, well, the Marshal says, satisfaction evident in his voice. Seems our blind rancher has been keeping secrets. He turns to his deputies. Gather everything. Bishop will want to see this. In the house, Samuel listens to their movements with grim resignation. 7 years of careful preparation, he says quietly. Undone in an afternoon. What happens now? Eliza asks, fear finally creeping into her voice. Samuel's expression hardens with resolve. Now we fight. Dawn breaks over Copper Gulch, painting the small frontier town in hues of amber and gold. Unlike the sleepy settlement it was just months ago, the town now buzzes with activity. Construction crews raising new buildings, surveyors with their instruments plotting the future railway line, and strangers in Eastern business attire moving. With the confident stride of men who see opportunity in every grain of desert sand. At the Silver Spur Saloon, Lucas Bishop sips his morning coffee, his keen eyes observing the town from his corner table. At 50, Bishop's appearance is unremarkable by design. Medium height, brown hair threaded with silver, clean-shaven face bearing the weathered lines of a man who spends most of his life outdoors. Nothing about him suggests danger, which is precisely why he's survived decades in a profession where most die young. Marshal Donovan enters, making his way directly to Bishop's table. Found something at Hawkins' place, he says without preamble, sliding into the opposite chair. Proof that our blind rancher isn't who he claims to be. Bishop reveals nothing in his expression. Show me, Donovan produces a faded wanted poster, carefully unfolding it on the table. The illustration is crude, but recognizable. A tall man, in a black duster, face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, 2 revolvers drawn. The name, Deadeye Hawkins, is printed in bold letters across the top, with "Wanted, Dead or Alive," and a substantial reward listed below. "Where did you find this?" Bishop asks, studying the poster with clinical detachment. "Hidden room in his barn, along with these." Donovan places several bullets on the table, unusual ammunition with distinctive markings. Custom made, same caliber and design as bullets recovered from 4 of Monroe's men at Diablo Pass 7 years ago. Bishop picks up one of the bullets, rolling it between his fingers with the familiarity of an expert. "Interesting. Anything else?" "Black duster with bullet holes. Location matches where Thompson shot Deadeye during the ambush." Donovan leans forward, lowering his voice. "It's him, Bishop. The blind act is just that. An act." Bishop tucks the bullet into his vest pocket. "I'll judge that for myself." He rises, leaving coins for his coffee. "Bring Hawkins in. I want to speak with him directly." "On what charge? Man's got friends in the county. Can't just arrest him without cause." A thin smile crosses Bishop's face. "Then manufacture one, Marshal. That's what badges are for, isn't it?" As Donovan departs, the saloon's batwing doors open again, admitting an unexpected visitor, Eliza Hawkins, dressed in practical riding clothes, her expression determined as she scans the room. Several patrons turn to stare, unaccustomed to seeing a young woman alone in the establishment, especially at this early hour. Bishop watches with interest as she approaches the bar. The saloon keeper, wiping glasses, eyes her warily. "Miss Hawkins, this ain't really a place for—" "I'm looking for Lucas Bishop," she interrupts, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. "I was told I'd find him here." Bishop remains seated, observing her with professional curiosity. She's composed, confident, either qualities inherited from her father or forged through years of managing a ranch alongside a blind man. Either way, she's not what he expected. "I'm Bishop," he finally says, breaking the silence. Eliza turns, studying him carefully before approaching his table. "You've been asking questions about my father." Bishop gestures to the empty chair Donovan. "Vacated." "Have a seat, Miss Hawkins. I prefer to stand." "As you wish." He leans back, regarding her thoughtfully. "You're right. I have been asking questions. It's what I'm paid to do." "By Clayton Monroe," she says. Not a question, but a statement. Something flickers in Bishop's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she knows this name. "You seem well informed for a rancher's daughter." "And you seem well-mannered for a hired gun," she counters. A ghost of a smile touches Bishop's lips. "I'm merely an investigator, Miss Hawkins." "Investigating what exactly?" "My father is a blind rancher who wants nothing more than to be left in peace." Bishop studies her for a long moment. "Is that what he told you?" He reaches into his jacket, removing a small, leather-bound notebook. "Samuel Hawkins arrived in this territory 7 years ago, purchased Ironwood Ranch with gold coin, and has lived quietly ever since." He flips a page. "But before that, nothing. No record of a Samuel Hawkins matching his description anywhere." "Many men reinvent themselves in the West," Eliza says, her voice steady. "It's not a crime." "No," Bishop agrees mildly. "But killing 14 men is." He closes the notebook. "That's Deadeye Hawkins' confirmed tally. The actual number is likely higher." Eliza's expression doesn't change, though something flashes behind her eyes. "You're confused, Mr. Bishop. My father couldn't possibly— Your father's blindness is relatively recent, Miss Hawkins." Bishop interrupts gently. "The bullet that took his sight was meant to take his life. Fired by a man named Joseph Thompson. Under orders from Clayton Monroe." Silence falls between them. Around the saloon, patrons pretend not to listen while straining to catch every word. "Why are you telling me this?" Eliza finally asks. Bishop leans forward. "Because I'm giving you a chance to warn him. Monroe knows Deadeye survived. He wants this finished, and the Corrigan brothers' land grab provides perfect cover." He pauses, watching her reaction. "Monroe arrives on tomorrow's train. After that, things get complicated." "Why would you warn us?" Suspicion edges her voice. Bishop's eyes show a flicker of something unexpected, perhaps regret. "Let's just say I prefer my contracts to be straightforward. Using the railroad as cover for an execution feels excessive." Eliza studies him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "I don't understand you, Mr. Bishop." "Few do," he acknowledges. "That's how I've survived this long." The saloon doors swing open again as Victor Corrigan enters with two of his men. He stops abruptly at the sight of Eliza, surprise quickly replaced by a calculating smile. "Miss Hawkins," he says, approaching, "what a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see you in town until the meeting this afternoon." "Mr. Corrigan," she acknowledges coolly. Corrigan's eyes shift to Bishop, narrowing slightly. "I see you've met our distinguished visitor from back east." "We were just getting acquainted," Bishop says smoothly, rising from his chair. "Miss Hawkins was expressing concern about recent inspections of her property." Corrigan's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Merely routine procedure. The railroad must ensure all properties along the proposed route meet territorial safety standards." He turns to Eliza. "I hope Marshal Donovan wasn't too intrusive. He can be overzealous in his duties. Finding hidden rooms and going through personal belongings seems beyond routine." Eliza replies sharply. Something triumphant flashes across Corrigan's face. "Hidden rooms? How fascinating. One wonders what a simple rancher would need to conceal." Bishop watches this exchange with interest, his eyes moving between them like a spectator at a chess match. "If you'll excuse me," Eliza says, turning to leave, "I have business to attend to before the town meeting." "Of course," Corrigan replies. "Though I should mention, the meeting agenda has changed. We'll be discussing new evidence that certain property owners may have misrepresented themselves when acquiring land in the territory." His smile turns predatory. Legal ownership requires legal identity, after all. The implied threat hangs in the air. Eliza's eyes harden, but she maintains her composure. "I look forward to the discussion, Mr. Corrigan." After she departs, Corrigan takes her vacated position beside Bishop's table. "Spirited girl," he comments. "Shame she's chosen the wrong side of progress." Bishop regards him with cool detachment. "You seem confident about the outcome of today's meeting." "The outcome was determined the moment Monroe purchased controlling interest in the territorial bank," Corrigan replies, lowering his voice. "This valley will belong to the A&P Railroad by the end of the month. All that remains is tidying up loose ends." Like Hawkins, Corrigan's expression darkens. "Hawkins is more than a loose end. He's a liability because of who he was, because of who he still is." Corrigan leans closer. "Don't let the blindness fool you, Bishop. Yesterday he drew and fired faster than most seeing men could manage. Hit exactly what he aimed at, too." Bishop's eyes narrow with professional interest. "Truly?" "See for yourself. He'll be at the meeting today. Cornered animals always fight hardest when they're trapped." Corrigan straightens his expensive jacket. "Just make sure you're standing clear when the trap springs." As Corrigan departs with his men, Bishop remains at his table, thoughtfully examining one of the custom bullets Donovan provided. After a moment, he slips it back into his pocket and exits the saloon, stepping into the morning sunlight. Outside, Copper Gulch continues its transformation from sleepy desert outpost to bustling frontier hub. Workers raise a new building across from the bank, future headquarters of the Arizona and Pacific Railroad Company, according to the sign prominently displayed. Bishop observes it all with the detached interest of a man accustomed to watching towns and people change, sometimes gradually, sometimes violently, but always inevitably. He makes his way toward the telegraph office, nodding to townspeople who regard the stranger with curious glances. Inside, the operator looks up from his key, recognition flickering across his face. "Another message for Mr. Monroe?" he asks, reaching for a blank form. Bishop nods, quickly writing his report. Hawkins confirmed as Deadeye. Evidence secured. Confrontation. Likely at town meeting. Recommend discretion until your arrival. As the telegraph operator begins transmitting the message, Bishop steps back outside, surveying the town with new eyes. Something has changed since his conversation with Eliza Hawkins, a subtle shift in his perception of the situation. After 20 years in Clayton Monroe's employ, Bishop has developed an instinct for when jobs turn from professional to personal, from business to vendetta. This operation bears all the hallmarks of the latter. At the edge of town, he observes Eliza Hawkins emerging from the general store, loading supplies into her wagon. Despite the morning's confrontation, she moves with purpose, her back straight, her actions efficient. There's no sign of fear or indecision, just the focused determination of someone preparing for battle. Bishop approaches her wagon, maintaining a respectful distance. "Miss Hawkins," she turns, wariness evident in her posture. "Mr. Bishop, one more thing you should know." He glances around, ensuring no one is within earshot. "Monroe isn't just bringing businessmen on tomorrow's train. He's bringing specialists, men who solve problems permanently." Eliza's expression remains controlled, though her knuckles whiten as she grips the wagon side. "Why tell me this?" Bishop considers her question, perhaps asking himself the same thing. Professional courtesy, perhaps, or maybe I've grown tired of cleaning up Monroe's personal vendettas. He adjusts his hat against the strengthening sun. "Your father should know. Thomas Quinn is leading them." The name clearly means something to Eliza, though she tries to hide her reaction. "I'll pass that along, though I'm not sure why my father would recognize the name of a railroad enforcer." "He'll know," Bishop assures her. "Quinn was at Diablo Pass 7 years ago. He's the one who killed your mother." Shock flashes across Eliza's face before she can mask it, not at the connection to her mother's death, but at Bishop's knowledge of it. "You seem remarkably well informed for someone who just arrived in town, Mr. Bishop. I've been tracking Deadeye Hawkins for 7 years, Miss Hawkins. I know more about your father than most people ever will." He steps back, preparing to leave, including the fact that he spared my life once, when he had every reason to take it. At Silver Creek, 1872. Before she can respond to this unexpected revelation, Bishop tips his hat and walks away, leaving Eliza staring after him with new questions about both the approaching conflict and the enigmatic man who seems to stand somewhere between ally and enemy. On the road back to Ironwood Ranch, Eliza pushes her horses harder than usual, dust billowing behind the wagon as she races to share what she's learned. The morning's events have confirmed what her father feared. Monroe's reach extends far beyond the railroad, and the noose is tightening around them with frightening speed. At Ironwood, she finds the ranch transformed. James Winters has positioned the hands strategically around the property, with lookouts posted on the surrounding ridges. The main house has been fortified, shutters closed and barred, water barrels positioned at key points in case of fire, rifles distributed to trusted men. Inside, she finds her father bent over a table with Matthew Ford, the gunsmith from Devil's Canyon. Between them lies a disassembled rifle of unusual design, with custom sights and a modified stock. "Eliza," Samuel says without turning, recognizing her footsteps instantly. "What news from town?" She describes her encounters with Bishop and Corrigan, the warnings about Monroe's arrival, and the changed agenda for the town meeting. Samuel listens without interruption, his unseeing eyes focused on middle distance, his fingers continuing to work on the rifle components with mechanical precision. "Thomas Quinn," he finally says, the name like a curse on his lips. "I should have killed him at Diablo Pass when I had the chance." Matthew Ford, a grizzled man with a blacksmith's arms and a watchmaker's hands, grunts in agreement. "Second chances are rare in our line of work, Samuel. Rarer still is the opportunity to correct past mistakes. This rifle will help," Samuel says, connecting pieces with practiced efficiency despite his blindness. "The modifications you've made, I can feel the difference." Ford watches with fascination as Samuel assembles the weapon without visual guidance, each component finding its place through touch and muscle memory. "I've never seen anything like it, a blind man who shoots better than most men with perfect eyesight." "Not blind in the ways that matter," Samuel replies, testing the rifle's action. The mechanism clicks into place with satisfying precision. "Sound, air currents, memory, they create a different kind of sight." Eliza approaches the table. "Bishop knew about Mother," she says quietly. "Said you spared his life years ago, at a place called Silver Creek." Samuel's hands pause momentarily. "Bishop was a Pinkerton back then, hunting me for a bank job I didn't commit. I could have shot him, but something told me he was different from the others, a man following a code rather than just collecting bounty." He resumes his work. "I disarmed him instead, left him tied to a tree for his partners to find. And now he works for Monroe?" James asks from the doorway. "The Pinkertons discharged him after that failure," Samuel explains. "Monroe hired him for his tracking skills. Bishop's reputation is built on never failing twice. Yet he warned me," Eliza points out, "about Quinn, about the meeting, about Monroe's arrival." Samuel's expression turns thoughtful. "Bishop's always been complicated, never cruel even when efficient. He secures the final component of the rifle. But don't mistake professional courtesy for allegiance, Eliza. He's still Monroe's man." "So what's our play?" James asks. "This town meeting sounds like a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Samuel agrees, rising from his chair. "Which is why we're going to spring it on our terms." He turns toward his daughter's voice. "Eliza, find that wooden box in my wardrobe, the small one with the brass lock." As she retrieves it, Samuel continues, "Monroe thinks he's orchestrating events from afar, using Corrigan and Donovan as his puppets. He doesn't arrive until tomorrow, which gives us one advantage." He accepts the box from Eliza, unlocking it with a small key from his pocket. "Tonight, we change the rules of the game. Inside the box lies a collection of documents, property, deeds, bank drafts, and most significantly, a sworn affidavit with the territorial governor's seal." "What is this?" Eliza asks, examining the papers. "Insurance," Samuel replies. "Your mother's idea. After the ambush, when we realized I was losing my sight, she insisted we prepare for every contingency." A sad smile touches his lips. "Margaret always saw further ahead than I did." James picks up the affidavit, whistling softly as he reads. This is signed by Judge Hollister himself, grants you legal amnesty for all prior actions in exchange for testimony against Monroe's land-grabbing operations 7 years ago. The testimony I was escorting to the territorial court when we were ambushed," Samuel confirms. "Monroe thought he'd buried it along with me. But this changes everything," Eliza says, hope entering her voice for the first time. "With this, they can still try to kill me," Samuel interrupts gently. "Paper only protects you. When those in power respect the law, Monroe never has. He secures the documents back in their box. But it does give us something to fight with at the meeting besides guns. Speaking of which," Ford interjects, gesturing to the modified rifle, "this is ready, but using it will require something extraordinary, even for a man with your skills." Samuel's Expression hardens with resolve. Extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures, Matthew. He runs his fingers along the rifle's barrel one final time, and Deadeye Hawkins has one last performance to give. As afternoon shadows lengthen across Ironwood Ranch, preparations for the coming confrontation continue. Weapons cleaned and loaded, horses readied, strategies discussed. The quiet routine of ranch life has given way to the tense anticipation of impending battle. In his room, Samuel Hawkins stands before a small mirror he cannot see, removing the dark glasses that have concealed his unseeing eyes for 7 years. His fingers move to the gun belt hanging beside the mirror, touching the worn leather and silver-inlaid revolvers with the reverence of a man reconnecting with essential parts of himself long set aside. "I promised you I was done with this life, Margaret," he whispers to the empty room. "But it seems the past isn't done with me." The sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the Arizona desert. In Copper Gulch, Mayor Coleman calls the town meeting to order, unknown to him that the blind rancher he seeks to destroy is already approaching, bringing with him a reckoning 7 years in the making. Copper Gulch's town hall, once a simple church before progress demanded a dedicated space for civic matters, overflows with bodies. Ranchers stand shoulder to shoulder with merchants. Miners mix with railroad workers, all drawn by rumors of decisions that will reshape the valley's future. Oil lamps cast long shadows across worried faces as Mayor Coleman takes his position. At the front of the room, flanked by Victor Corrigan and Marshal Donovan. "Folks, thank you for coming on such short notice," Coleman begins, his round face gleaming with perspiration despite the evening cool. A former shopkeeper elevated to mayor through Corrigan's influence, Coleman possesses the practiced smile of a man who has spent his life convincing customers they need things they don't. "As you know, our town stands at the threshold of unprecedented prosperity. The Arizona and Pacific Railroad has selected Copper Gulch as a primary station on its new line, bringing commerce, opportunity, and civilization to our humble community." Appreciative murmurs rise from those already benefiting from the railroad's presence. Shopkeepers selling supplies to survey crews, saloon owners serving thirsty workers, landowners who've sold their properties at premium prices. Others, mostly ranchers whose livelihoods depend on open range, remain silent, their expressions guarded. Coleman gestures to Corrigan, who steps forward with the confident air of a man unaccustomed to opposition. "The A&P Railroad is investing significant capital in this region," Corrigan announces, his voice carrying to the room's furthest corners. "Mr. Clayton Monroe himself arrives tomorrow to finalize arrangements that will transform Copper Gulch from a whistle-stop to a commercial hub rivaling Tucson." He pauses, allowing this vision to settle in the audience's imagination. However, certain obstacles threaten this bright future, specifically irregularities in land titles along the proposed rail corridor. A concerned murmur ripples through the crowd. Land titles in frontier territories often exist in legal gray areas, claims established through occupation rather than formal documentation, boundaries defined by natural landmarks rather than survey stakes. "The territorial governor has granted us authority to review all property claims within 20 miles of town," Corrigan continues. "Those with clear, legitimate ownership will be offered fair compensation for necessary easements. Those with questionable claims may face more complicated situations." At the back of the room, Lucas Bishop watches the proceedings with detached interest, noting how skillfully Corrigan manipulates the crowd's hopes and fears. The investigator's attention shifts as the doors open, admitting a late arrival. Conversation falters as heads turn toward the unexpected figure in the doorway. Samuel Hawkins stands perfectly still, his presence commanding attention despite his apparent disability. He wears no dark glasses tonight, his milky, unseeing eyes exposed to public view. Beside him, Eliza and James Winters create a protective formation as they navigate through the suddenly silent crowd. Corrigan recovers first, a thin smile spreading across his face. "Mr. Hawkins, we weren't certain you'd join us, given your condition." Samuel moves forward with surprising confidence, his cane tapping softly against the wooden floor. "Some matters are too important to miss, Mr. Corrigan, regardless of personal inconvenience." "Indeed," Corrigan agrees, exchanging glances with Mayor Coleman. "We were just discussing property verification, a matter that concerns you directly, I believe." Samuel stops several paces from the front table. "So I've heard." His voice carries easily in the hushed room. "Curious timing, given that my ranch deed has been recognized by the Territorial Land Office for 7 years without question." Marshal Donovan steps forward, producing a document from his vest pocket. "New evidence has emerged suggesting certain discrepancies in your claim, Hawkins." He unfolds the paper with theatrical deliberation, specifically questions about your legal identity when filing the original deed. Murmurs ripple through the assembled townspeople. Land disputes are common in the territories, but challenges to a man's very identity strike at something more fundamental. "My identity," Samuel repeats, his tone revealing nothing. "Indeed," Donovan continues, clearly relishing his moment of power. "Territorial law requires that property buyers provide proof of their legal name and standing. We have reason to believe that Samuel Hawkins isn't your true identity, that you adopted this name 7 years ago to escape a complicated past." The room falls silent as all eyes focus on the blind rancher. Even those with no stake in the railroad's plans lean forward, drawn by the spectacle unfolding before them. "That's a serious accusation, Marshal," Samuel replies, evenly. "I assume you have evidence beyond speculation." "Oh, we do." Donovan nods to a deputy who brings forward a wooden crate, the same hidden cache discovered in Samuel's barn. The marshal removes several items, displaying them dramatically. The black duster with bullet holes, wanted posters bearing the name Deadeye Hawkins, and the custom ammunition. "These were found concealed on your property yesterday," Donovan announces. "Items connecting you to a notorious outlaw believed killed 7 years ago. A man wanted for multiple killings across 3 territories." Gasps and whispers sweep through the crowd. Several people edge away from Samuel, as if his mere proximity might be dangerous. "Those items prove nothing," James Winters interjects forcefully. "Many men collect memorabilia from famous outlaws. Half the saloons in the territory display wanted posters as decoration." "Perhaps," Corrigan concedes with mock reasonableness. "But combined with other irregularities in Mr. Hawkins' background, they raise troubling questions. Questions that must be resolved before the railroad can negotiate fair compensation for necessary easements across his property." Samuel stands motionless, his unseeing eyes somehow focused despite their blindness. "Let's dispense with the pretense, gentlemen. This isn't about easements or legal technicalities. It's about forcing me off my land entirely." "Now, Hawkins," Mayor Coleman begins placatingly, "it's about Clayton Monroe," Samuel continues, his voice cutting through Coleman's protest like a blade, "about finishing what he started 7 years ago at Diablo Pass." The name falls like a stone into still water, creating ripples of reaction through the crowd. Clayton Monroe's reputation extends far beyond railroad interests. A man whose wealth has purchased political influence throughout the territory, whose business practices are admired or feared depending on which side of his power one stands. Corrigan's confident expression falters momentarily. "Mr. Monroe's interest in this region is purely business, I assure you. Like the business that left my wife dead and me blind." Samuel's voice remains controlled, but undercurrents of steel run through it. Like the business that employed Thomas Quinn and his men to ambush us at Diablo Pass. From his position at the back of the room, Bishop observes the shifting dynamics. With professional interest, Samuel's direct confrontation has altered the careful script Corrigan and Donovan prepared, forcing them into uncomfortable territory. These are serious accusations against a respected businessman, Coleman sputters, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. They are, Samuel agrees, and I can prove them. He turns slightly toward Eliza, who removes a document from her satchel and places it in his hand. With unerring precision, he extends it toward Donovan. This affidavit, signed by Territorial Judge Hollister, grants me immunity in exchange for testimony regarding Clayton Monroe's illegal activities. Activities including bribery of officials, fraudulent land acquisitions, and orchestrated violence against those who opposed him. Donovan hesitates before accepting the document, his eyes scanning its contents with growing discomfort. This appears authentic, but it is authentic, Samuel interrupts, as is my testimony detailing Monroe's operations. Testimony that was supposed to reach the territorial court before Monroe's men intercepted us. His milky eyes somehow find Corrigan, despite his blindness. Testimony that still exists, securely deposited with trustworthy parties to be delivered should anything happen to me or my family. The atmosphere in the town hall shifts perceptibly as those present reassess the conflict playing out before them. What began as a simple land dispute has transformed into something far more consequential, a confrontation between powerful forces with implications beyond the immediate valley. Corrigan recovers his composure, his smile returning though, colder than before. Fascinating theatrics, Hawkins. But even if this document is genuine, it doesn't change the fundamental issue. Your property deed was filed under a false identity. That alone invalidates your claim, regardless of whatever arrangement you had with Judge Hollister. Perhaps, in a normal court proceeding, a new voice interjects from the back of the room. All heads turn as Lucas Bishop steps forward, moving through the crowd with unhurried confidence. But territorial law includes certain exceptions worth considering. Corrigan's eyes narrow at this unexpected intervention. Mr. Bishop, I wasn't aware you had legal expertise to offer. Not legal expertise, Bishop acknowledges, reaching the front of the room. Just familiarity with certain territorial statutes pertaining to witness protection. He produces a small, leather-bound book from his coat. Section 14, Paragraph 3. Individuals providing testimony in cases involving territorial security may, at the discretion of appointed judges, assume new legal identities with all attendant rights and recognitions. He closes the book, meeting Corrigan's gaze steadily. Judge Hollister's affidavit appears to invoke this specific provision. If so, Samuel Hawkins is his legal identity, regardless of who he might have been before. A stunned silence falls over the assembly. Corrigan stares at Bishop with barely concealed fury, while Donovan shifts uncomfortably, suddenly uncertain of his position. Since when does Clayton Monroe's personal investigator advocate for his targets? Corrigan demands, abandoning pretense entirely. Bishop's expression remains neutral. I was hired to locate a missing person and verify their identity. I've done so. He glances toward Samuel. My contract didn't specify participating in an illegal property seizure or ignoring territorial law. From the crowd, a weathered rancher speaks up. If Hawkins has legal claim to his land, confirmed by a territorial judge, what exactly are we doing here tonight? Others voice similar sentiments, the mood shifting from spectators at an entertainment to citizens questioning potentially corrupt proceedings. Mayor Coleman, sensing the changing tide, attempts to regain control. Perhaps we should postpone further discussion until these legal matters can be properly reviewed. The town council will— There's nothing to review, Eliza Hawkins declares firmly. My father's claim is legitimate. Judge Hollister's affidavit confirms it. Any attempt to seize our property is not only illegal but will be met with resistance. She surveys the room, her gaze challenging. Is that how Copper Gulch wants to be known? As a town where legally owned land can be stolen through manufactured technicalities? Murmurs of agreement rise from other ranchers and independent property owners who recognize their own vulnerability in Samuel's situation. What happens to him today could happen to them tomorrow. Corrigan's face darkens with barely suppressed rage. This meeting is not a court of law. The railroad's requirements can be met through legal easements or alternative routes, Samuel interjects calmly. I've never opposed progress, Mr. Corrigan, only theft disguised as progress. Before Corrigan can respond, the town hall doors burst open. A breathless telegraph operator rushes in, clutching a yellow paper. Mayor Coleman, urgent wire from Mr. Monroe. Coleman accepts the telegram, reading it with growing alarm. He whispers urgently to Corrigan, whose expression shifts from anger to calculation. It seems circumstances have changed, Corrigan announces after a brief consultation. Mr. Monroe has advanced his travel plans. He'll arrive on tonight's special train rather than tomorrow's regular service. He checks his pocket watch. In fact, he should be pulling into the station within the hour. A predatory smile spreads across his face as he turns to Samuel. He expresses particular interest in resolving the Ironwood Ranch situation personally. Perhaps you'd care to present your evidence directly to him. The implications hang in the air. What began as a public forum has transformed into something more dangerous, a direct confrontation with the man who ordered Samuel's death 7 years ago. Samuel stands perfectly still, absorbing this development. Then unexpectedly he smiles. Nothing would please me more, Mr. Corrigan. After 7 years, Monroe and I have much to discuss. James Winters moves closer to Samuel, his hand resting near his holster. This is madness, he mutters. Monroe won't come alone. I'm counting on that, Samuel replies softly, his voice carrying no further than James and Eliza. Bishop observes this exchange with professional interest, noting the subtle shift in Samuel's posture, from defensive to something approaching. Anticipation. The blind rancher now radiates the controlled readiness Bishop recognizes from descriptions of Deadeye before a confrontation. The meeting is adjourned, Mayor Coleman announces hastily. All further business will resume tomorrow after Mr. Monroe has run his trap. A voice calls from the crowd, followed by nervous laughter quickly suppressed. As the townspeople disperse, many linger in small groups outside, discussing the evening's revelations in hushed tones. The atmosphere has transformed from civic procedure to anticipation of approaching drama. Within an hour, Clayton Monroe, a man whose name usually appears only in newspaper business sections or political endorsements, will arrive in their small town, and confrontation seems inevitable. Near the livery stable, Samuel stands with Eliza and James, their heads close together in urgent conversation. This changes everything, James insists. Monroe arriving tonight instead of tomorrow. He's obviously been warned. Of course he has, Samuel agrees. Bishop's telegram would have reached him hours ago. Eliza glances toward the railroad station, where workers hurriedly prepare for an unexpected arrival. Then we're walking into a trap. No, Samuel corrects her, his voice carrying an edge of anticipation. He is. From the shadows, Bishop approaches, maintaining a respectful distance. Hawkins, he calls softly. A word. James shifts protectively, but Samuel raises a hand to stay him. It's all right. He turns toward Bishop's voice. Say your piece. Monroe's bringing 6 men with him, professional fighters, not local talent. Bishop's voice is matter-of-fact, delivering information rather than warnings. Thomas Quinn is leading them. They're traveling in the private car at the rear of the train. Samuel absorbs this information without visible reaction. Thank you for the intelligence, Bishop, though I'm curious why you're providing it. Bishop is silent for a moment, as if considering his own motivations. Let's say I prefer clean endings. Monroe's vendetta has dragged on too long. And your loyalties? Samuel asks. I fulfill my contracts. Bishop replies simply. I was hired to find Deadeye Hawkins. I've done so. He pauses. What happens next wasn't specified in my agreement. A ghost of a smile touches Samuel's lips, still parsing the fine print after all these years. It's kept me alive. Bishop steps closer, lowering his voice further. Quinn has changed his methods since you last faced him. He favors a shoulder rig now, cross-draw, left side. Slower to start, but smoother on the follow-through. Samuel's head tilts slightly, recognizing this information for what it is, a professional courtesy from one specialist to another. I appreciate the insight. Don't mistake this for sentiment, Hawkins, Bishop warns. I'm merely evening odds that Monroe unfairly tilted. Of course, Samuel acknowledges. Professional courtesy only. Bishop turns to leave, then hesitates. One last thing. Monroe doesn't know about the modified rifle. That might be your only real advantage. As Bishop melts back into the shadows, Eliza stares after him with confusion. Can we trust him? About the facts? Yes, Samuel answers. About his intentions? Never completely. He turns toward the distant sound of an approaching train, his unseeing eyes somehow focusing on the horizon. Get the rifle from our wagon, James. It's time to prepare for a reunion 7 years in the making. The train whistle splits the night air, announcing the arrival of Clayton Monroe, and the final act in a drama that began with an ambush at Diablo Pass. As townspeople gather at the station, drawn by curiosity and anticipation, Samuel Hawkins stands apart, his face tilted toward the approaching sound, his hands steady as they check his revolvers one final time. You don't have to be part of this, he tells Eliza quietly. You could ride back to the ranch, be safely away when I'm staying, she interrupts firmly. Mother would have stayed. You know that. A complex emotion crosses Samuel's weathered face. Pride mingled with resignation. Yes, he agrees softly. Margaret never ran from a fight, even when she should have. He reaches out, finding Eliza's face with gentle fingers, mapping features so similar to her mother's. Whatever happens tonight, remember that everything I've done, everything I am, has been for you. The train rumbles into the station, steel wheels grinding against rails, steam billowing into the cool desert night. As the private car comes to rest, a silence falls over the gathered crowd. The door opens, revealing a silhouette backlit by elegant interior lamps. Clayton Monroe, stepping onto Copper Gulch's humble platform as if taking ownership of it by the mere contact of his polished boots with the weathered wood. Samuel Hawkins straightens, turning toward the sound of that door opening, his face set with grim purpose. After 7 years of hiding in plain sight, Deadeye stands revealed, ready to confront the ghosts of his past and the very real dangers of his present. Behind Monroe, other figures emerge from the private car, hard men with cold eyes and holstered weapons led by Thomas Quinn, whose scarred face bears the permanent reminder of his last encounter with Deadeye Hawkins. His hand rests casually near his cross-draw holster, exactly as Bishop described. As Monroe surveys the crowd, his gaze finally settles on the blind rancher standing apart from the others. Recognition dawns, followed by something approaching satisfaction. Deadeye, he calls, his cultured voice carrying across the platform. How good to see you again, or perhaps I should say, how good to be seen by you. He smiles at his own cruel joke. We have unfinished business, you and I." Samuel's milky eyes somehow focused directly on Monroe, despite his blindness. "Yes," he agrees, his voice quiet but carrying. "We certainly do." Clayton Monroe stands framed by the private railcar's ornate doorway, a man whose appearance embodies power in the changing West. Unlike Corrigan's flashy Eastern suits, Monroe wears the understated quality of true wealth, a perfectly tailored charcoal jacket over a silk vest, a watch chain of subtle gold, boots of the finest leather. At 60, his silver hair and immaculately trimmed beard give him the distinguished appearance of a statesman rather than the ruthless empire builder he truly is. "What an unexpected pleasure," Monroe continues, descending to the platform with unhurried confidence. "When I received Bishop's telegram confirming your identity, I simply couldn't wait until morning." His voice carries the cultured tones of Eastern education layered over frontier pragmatism. 7 years is a long time between conversations. The gathered townspeople fall silent, sensing the dangerous currents flowing between these men. Even those with no stake in their conflict instinctively step back, creating a cleared space around Samuel and the approaching Monroe. "Our last conversation was cut short," Samuel replies evenly. "As I recall, you had your men doing most of the talking, with bullets." Monroe's smile doesn't reach his calculating eyes. "Ancient history, surely. We were younger men then, with younger men's impulsiveness." He gestures expansively. "I've come to Copper Gulch with visions of progress, of civilization taming these wild territories. The railroad brings opportunity for everyone, including opportunities to seize land through manufactured legal technicalities." Samuel's voice carries across the platform, ensuring the gathering crowd hears every word. "Or opportunities to eliminate witnesses to past crimes?" A murmur ripples through the onlookers. Monroe's expression hardens momentarily before his practiced smile returns. "You misunderstand my intentions entirely. I've come to resolve our differences amicably." He turns toward the townspeople. "The Arizona and Pacific Railroad will transform this valley, bringing prosperity unimaginable just a few years ago. All we require is cooperation from forward-thinking citizens." "And those who won't cooperate?" Samuel challenges. "What happens to them?" Monroe sighs with theatrical patience. "Progress inevitably creates winners and losers, Mr. Hawkins. The wise align themselves with the future rather than clinging to the past." He steps closer, lowering his voice. "But we needn't discuss such matters here. Perhaps a private conversation would be more productive." Behind Monroe, Thomas Quinn and 5 hard-eyed men maintain a loose formation, their hands never straying far from their weapons. Quinn, tall and gaunt with a livid scar running from his right eye to the corner of his mouth, watches Samuel with the focused intensity of a predator assessing prey. "I believe we're past the point of private conversations," Samuel responds, standing his ground, "especially given the men you've brought with you." Monroe glances back at his enforcers with casual dismissal. "Merely security precautions for traveling in these untamed territories. A man in my position takes prudent measures, like the prudent measures you took at Diablo Pass." The edge in Samuel's voice cuts through Monroe's composure. "When your men murdered my wife and left me for dead." The accusation hangs in the air, impossible to dismiss. Even those townspeople who had viewed Monroe's arrival with excitement shift uncomfortably, reassessing the distinguished businessman in light of these charges. Monroe's smile finally vanishes, replaced by cold calculation. "You've become a storyteller. In your retirement, Deadeye, fiction suits you." He turns to the crowd. "This man is not who he pretends to be. Before claiming to be a simple rancher, he was a notorious gunman, a killer for hire whose victims number in the dozens." "That's rich coming from you," James Winters calls out, stepping forward to stand beside Samuel. How many men have died for Clayton Munro's progress? How many families displaced by his land grabs? Corrigan moves to Munro's side, whispering urgently in his ear. Munro listens, his expression darkening. "I'm told you've produced some manner of legal document," he says to Samuel. "An alleged affidavit from Judge Hollister." "Not alleged," Samuel corrects him. "Genuine, signed and sealed, granting me immunity in exchange for testimony about your operations." Even without sight, his posture and voice project absolute certainty. "Testimony that includes your orchestration of the Silver Creek bank robbery to eliminate competitors, your bribery of territorial officials to secure water rights, and your employment of men like Quinn to remove obstacles permanently." Quinn's hand drifts closer to his holster, his scarred face tightening with anticipation. Beside Samuel, Eliza notices this subtle movement, her own hand shifting toward the hidden derringer in her pocket. "Impressive allegations," Munro acknowledges, his tone hardening, "but ultimately worthless without evidence. Judge Hollister's reputation for flexibility regarding the law is well known. A document signed under duress, or perhaps forged entirely, would never stand up to proper examination." Mayor Coleman steps forward, mopping his brow nervously. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow, after everyone's had a chance to rest. The town council could convene a special session to... There's no need to burden the good citizens of Copper Gulch with tedious legal matters." Munro interrupts smoothly. "Mr. Hawkins and I can resolve our differences directly." He turns back to Samuel. "A simple proposition. Sell Ironwood Ranch to the railroad at triple its market value, surrender any documents you claim to possess, and you're free to relocate anywhere beyond territorial boundaries. Start fresh." "And if I decline?" Samuel asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Munro's smile returns, cold as a desert winter. "Then I fear matters would become unnecessarily complicated. Legal challenges can be so prolonged and expensive. Few ranchers have resources to withstand extended litigation against a corporation like the Arizona and Pacific." The threat beneath his reasonable words is unmistakable to everyone present. Munro is offering a choice between surrender and destruction. Before Samuel can respond, the crowd parts as Lucas Bishop approaches, his movements unhurried yet purposeful. "A moment, Mr. Munro," he calls, stopping several paces from his employer. "There's something you should know before negotiations proceed further." Munro's eyes narrow with suspicion. "I'm listening, Bishop." "The affidavit is genuine," Bishop states flatly. "I've examined it myself. Furthermore, copies have been dispatched to the Territorial Governor's office and 3 separate newspapers." He meets Munro's gaze steadily. Whatever happens here tonight has already gone beyond Copper Gulch. A flash of genuine anger crosses Munro's composed features. "You overstep your authority, Bishop. You were hired to locate Deadeye, not investigate. Legal documents. I was hired to confirm facts," Bishop corrects him. "I've done so thoroughly." Munro studies his investigator with new eyes, reassessing the man he thought he knew. "I see." He turns back to Samuel. "It appears the situation is more complex than I initially understood." His voice hardens. "Quinn, secure Mr. Bishop. It seems he requires a reminder about employer loyalty." Quinn signals 2 men, who move to flank Bishop. The investigator stands motionless, his hands relaxed at his sides, his eyes never leaving Munro's. "That would be unwise," Bishop says quietly. "Like Hawkins, I've taken precautions. Documentation detailing your operations over the 7 years I've worked for you is held by trustees, to be released upon my disappearance or death." A thin smile touches his lips. "Professional insurance, Mr. Munro. I'm sure you understand." For the first time, uncertainty flickers across Munro's confident facade. His plans are unraveling in public view, his authority challenged by the very men he expected to control. Samuel breaks the tense silence. It seems we're at an impasse, Monroe. Your legal manipulations won't work. Your intimidation tactics have failed. What remains? Monroe's eyes turn cold as he studies the blind gunman. There's always a solution for men like us, Deadeye. His voice drops, though it carries in the stillness. The direct approach. The implication hangs in the air, a challenge that transcends legal maneuvering and returns to the brutal simplicity of the frontier justice they both understand. Samuel's blind eyes somehow find Monroe with unsettling accuracy. Some disputes can only be settled one way, he agrees, his hand hovering near his holster. Eliza steps forward, alarmed. Pa, no. It's all right, Eliza, Samuel reassures her quietly. Some things a man must finish himself. Monroe studies Samuel with calculated interest. Are you actually proposing what I think you are? A blind man challenging me to a gunfight? He laughs, the sound devoid of humor. Even for you, Deadeye, that's remarkably foolish. Not you, Samuel clarifies. You've never done your own killing, Monroe. Always hired others. His unseeing eyes shift toward Quinn. I'm challenging the man who pulled the trigger at Diablo Pass, the man who shot Margaret in cold blood while she begged for mercy. Quinn steps forward, a predatory smile spreading across his scarred face. Been waiting 7 years to finish what I started, Deadeye. His voice rasps like steel on stone. Thought you were dead all this time. Finding out you've been hiding, playing blind rancher. He spits on the platform boards. That's just insulting to a professional. Thomas, Monroe cautions, suddenly wary of how events are unfolding. No, Quinn interrupts, his eyes never leaving Samuel. This needs settling, Mr. Monroe, man to man. His scarred face twists with anticipation, or should I say, man to blind man. Samuel stands perfectly still, his posture betraying neither fear nor uncertainty. Diablo Pass was your best shot, Quinn. You won't get a better one. The gathered crowd has fallen completely silent, witnessing a confrontation straight from the dime novels many secretly read but publicly disdain. Even Monroe seems captured by the inexorable gravity of the moment, stepping back to give the combatants space. Terms, Quinn asks, rolling his shoulders to loosen them. Simple, Samuel replies. You against me, no interference. He inclines his head toward Monroe. Your employer guarantees that regardless of the outcome, my daughter and friends leave unharmed. Monroe hesitates before nodding. Agreed. Though I maintain this entire exercise is unnecessary and— Shut up, Clayton, Quinn interrupts with surprising familiarity. You've wanted Deadeye dead for 7 years. Time to let me finish the job properly. He turns back to Samuel. Where and when? Here, Samuel answers. Now. A ripple of excitement passes through the onlookers, who begin urgently clearing the platform area, creating an impromptu arena for the confrontation. James tries once more to intervene, but Samuel shakes his head firmly. Take Eliza inside the station house, he instructs quietly. No matter what happens, be ready to ride for Devil's Canyon afterward. Matthew Ford will help you if needed. Pa, please, Eliza begins, her voice tight with fear. Samuel smiles gently, briefly touching her cheek. Trust me, Eliza. I may be blind, but I see more clearly now than I have in years. He turns toward James. The rifle. In position, James confirms reluctantly. Southern end of the platform, wrapped in the canvas, just as you specified. Samuel nods, squeezing his daughter's hand once before releasing it. It's time. As James guides a reluctant Eliza toward the station house, Quinn positions himself at the opposite end of the cleared platform. He removes his jacket, revealing the cross-draw shoulder holster Bishop had described. With deliberate movements, he checks his revolver before returning it to the leather. Never killed a blind man before, Quinn calls across the space. Might actually feel bad about this for about 5 seconds. Samuel removes his dark glasses, exposing his milky eyes to the lamplight. Don't worry, Quinn. In my mind, I can see you perfectly. His hands move to the gun belt at his waist. I remember every detail of your face from Diablo Pass, especially your expression when you realized I wasn't as dead as you thought. Quinn's hand unconsciously touches the scar running. Down his face, the permanent reminder of his last encounter with Deadeye. You got lucky with that last shot, he growls. Won't happen again. Monroe observes from a safe distance, his expression revealing little beyond professional interest. Beside him, Corrigan watches with barely contained excitement, while Bishop maintains a position offering clear sightlines to both combatants, his hand resting casually near his own concealed weapon. How do we do this? Quinn asks, flexing his fingers near his holster. Not exactly sporting to go on draw when my opponent can't see the signal. Sound carries better than sight, Samuel replies calmly. Drop a coin. We draw when it hits the platform. Quinn produces a silver dollar from his pocket, showing it to the crowd. Simple enough. He positions himself carefully, adjusting his stance for optimal draw from his shoulder rig. Any last words, Deadeye? Samuel stands relaxed yet alert, his unseeing eyes focused on middle distance. Margaret sends her regards, he says softly. Something flickers across Quinn's scarred face, perhaps the ghost of conscience long thought dead. Then his expression hardens once more. Let's finish this. He raises the coin. Time seems to slow as the silver dollar leaves Quinn's fingers, flipping end over end through the lamplit night air. The crowd holds its collective breath, witnessing a moment that will become legend, regardless of its outcome. The blind gunman facing his wife's killer in a final reckoning. The coin descends in agonizing slow motion. Quinn's hand hovers near his shoulder holster, muscles tensed for the draw. Samuel stands motionless, only his head slightly tilted as he tracks the coin's fall by sound alone. The silver dollar strikes the wooden platform with a sharp metallic ping. What happens next unfolds with such blinding speed that witnesses later disagree on the exact sequence. Quinn's hand blurs toward his shoulder rig, drawing with the practiced efficiency that has ended dozens of lives. In the same instant, Samuel drops to one knee, his revolvers clearing leather with impossible speed for a blind man. Both men fire. Simultaneously, the thunderous reports merging into a single deafening crash that echoes across the station platform. Quinn staggers backward, a look of profound disbelief crossing his scarred features. He stares down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest, then back at Samuel, who remains kneeling, revolvers extended. How? Quinn gasps, his voice barely audible. You're blind. I don't need eyes to know where a snake stands, Samuel replies, his aim never wavering. Or to hear your breathing change as you prepared to fire. Quinn's revolver slips from nerveless fingers, clattering to the platform. He takes one faltering step forward before his knees buckle. He collapses, his final expression frozen between disbelief and reluctant admiration. For a heartbeat, absolute silence envelops the station. Then chaos erupts as Monroe's remaining men reach for their weapons. Before they can clear leather, multiple rifles crack from various positions around the platform. James Winters and several Ironwood Ranch hands strategically positioned before the confrontation began. That's enough, Bishop's voice cuts through. The commotion as he draws his own weapon, aiming not at Samuel, but at Monroe. The next man who draws dies. Monroe raises his hands slowly, his composed facade finally cracking to reveal the fury beneath. You betray me for this killer? He demands of Bishop. I'm not betraying anyone, Bishop responds evenly. I'm preventing a massacre that would bring territorial marshals down on this entire town. He gestures with his revolver. The contest was agreed upon. Quinn lost. Honor the terms you accepted. Monroe's face contorts with barely controlled rage, but calculation quickly reasserts itself. His eyes move from his fallen enforcer to the blind gunman still kneeling on the platform, then to the armed ranch hands covering his remaining men. The odds have shifted decisively against him. This changes nothing, Monroe finally says, his voice tight with suppressed fury. The railroad will still come through this valley. Ironwood Ranch will still be exactly where it is, Samuel interrupts, rising smoothly to his feet, his revolvers now lowered but still ready, with its legal owner continuing to operate it as he has for 7 years. He holsters one revolver, his movements decisive despite his blindness. The difference is that now everyone knows exactly who and what you are, Monroe. The affidavits, your methods, Quinn's death in a confrontation he initiated, all will be reported in every newspaper from here to San Francisco. Do you think that matters? Monroe scoffs. I've weathered worse publicity. Perhaps, Samuel acknowledges. But investors are notoriously nervous about scandals. Railroad stock prices are remarkably sensitive to public opinion. He smiles thinly. And territorial governors facing re-election tend to distance themselves from controversial figures. Monroe's expression reveals the first hint of genuine concern as he calculates the potential damage beyond this immediate confrontation. His railroad venture requires investor confidence and political support, both now threatened. From the station house doorway, Eliza watches with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The father she thought she knew has transformed before her eyes, revealing skills and capabilities she could never have imagined. Yet in his stance, in the controlled precision of his movements, she recognizes the same man who taught her to ride, who comforted her through childhood fears, who built a life from nothing after tragedy. As the standoff continues on the platform, the future hangs in balance, not just for Samuel Hawkins and Clayton Monroe, but for Copper Gulch and the entire valley beyond. The blind rancher has won this confrontation, but evening's drama has set forces in motion that none can fully predict. Samuel turns his unseeing eyes toward Monroe, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Your move, Clayton," he says quietly. "Choose carefully." Autumn paints the Arizona Valley in hues of amber and gold as a solitary rider approaches Ironwood Ranch. Lucas Bishop guides his horse through the gate, noting the changes 3 months have brought: new paint on the barn, expanded corrals, and most significantly, the absence of tension that had permeated the property during his last visit. On the porch, Samuel Hawkins sits, rocking gently, his face turned toward the warmth of the afternoon sun. Though his dark glasses have returned, his posture has changed subtly, no longer a man hiding his capabilities, but one comfortable with who he is, both past and present. "Afternoon, Bishop," Samuel calls before the rider is within normal earshot. "Been a while." Bishop dismounts, a ghost of a smile touching his typically impassive features. "Some things haven't changed," he observes, approaching the porch. "Your hearing still puts bats to shame." Samuel gestures to the empty chair beside him. "What brings you back to Ironwood? Thought you'd be halfway to California by now." "Business. Concluded in Denver faster than expected." Bishop settles into the offered seat. "Thought I'd deliver news personally rather than by telegram." "Monroe," Samuel surmises. Bishop nods, momentarily forgetting Samuel can't see the gesture. "Yes, the Railroad Commission denied his petition to force easements through contested properties. Your testimony proved persuasive. And the criminal charges. Insufficient evidence for prosecution," Bishop replies. "But his reputation is damaged beyond repair. Investors have withdrawn support, political allies have distanced themselves, and the Arizona and Pacific has been absorbed by Southern Pacific." He pauses. "Monroe left for Europe last week. Permanent departure, from what I gather." A satisfied expression crosses Samuel's weathered face. "Justice takes different forms, I suppose." He tilts his head slightly. "And the Corrigan brothers?" "Victor fled with Monroe. Edward accepted the territorial governor's amnesty offer in exchange for testimony about land fraud operations. Bishop glances toward the distant mountains. Copper Gulch elected a new mayor last month, man named Jenkins. Tom's father, Samuel notes with approval. Good man, fair-minded. The conversation pauses as Eliza emerges from the house, carrying a tray with coffee. She's accompanied by a young man Bishop recognizes as Matthew Ford's apprentice from Devil's Canyon. Mr. Bishop, she acknowledges, her initial wariness having softened over time. Will you stay for dinner? Daniel and I were just discussing the new smithy we're building on the north side of the property. Bishop accepts the offered coffee. Appreciate the invitation, but I'll be moving on before sundown. His eyes note the subtle changes in Eliza, a new confidence, a happiness absent during their first encounter. The young smithy watches her with unmistakable devotion as they return inside. Life moves forward, Samuel observes, seemingly aware of Bishop's thoughts. Even after the kind of storm we weathered, Bishop sips his coffee thoughtfully. What about you, Hawkins? The legend of Deadeye has been revived with some rather dramatic embellishments. Stories of a blind gunfighter who outdrew Thomas Quinn are spreading across the territories. Samuel's expression reveals mild amusement. Legends belong to yesterday. I'm content with today. He gestures toward the sounds of construction from the north pasture. Ironwood is expanding. Eliza and Daniel will marry in the spring. The railroad will still come through the valley, but along a different route, benefiting the town without destroying the ranches. His voice softens. Margaret would be pleased with how things turned out. And Deadeye? Bishop asks carefully. Is he truly retired this time? Samuel's hand moves unconsciously to where his gun belt would have rested in earlier years. Some skills you never lose, Bishop, but having them doesn't mean you need to use them. He smiles slightly. I prefer the sound of hammers building something, new to the sound of gunfire ending something old. As the afternoon wanes toward evening, Bishop prepares to depart. At the corral gate, he hesitates, turning back to Samuel, who has followed him out. One last thing you should know, Bishop says, his professional detachment momentarily slipping. I've resigned from investigation work, purchasing land near Santa Fe, going to try my hand at horse breeding. Samuel's expression suggests he understands the significance of this change. Seems we're both finding new paths. Different paths, same destination perhaps, Bishop muses. A life defined by more than what we were. As Bishop mounts his horse, Samuel extends his hand. Safe travels, Lucas. The use of his first name, a subtle acknowledgement of something shifted between them, doesn't escape Bishop's notice. He clasps the offered hand. And you, Samuel. The setting sun casts long shadows across Ironwood Ranch as Bishop rides away. Behind him, Samuel Hawkins stands at the gate, a figure transformed by conflict yet anchored by purpose. The blind rancher has reclaimed more than his land in this struggle. He has reconciled his past with his present, ensuring a future where both can exist in balance. As darkness falls across the Arizona Valley, Samuel turns toward home, guided not by sight, but by the sounds of life continuing, evolving, rebuilding. The legends of Deadeye Hawkins will live on in frontier tales, but the man himself has found something far more valuable than notoriety. He has found peace. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.